Hello and welcome to the RevOps Show. Give me an R, give me an F, give me a P. Yep, today it's all about RFPs and more importantly, why RFPs for CRMs fail. Like always, there's lots of great insight from Doug and Jess, so let's keep it short and get ready to RevOps.
Jess, I just want you to know that the quality of the recording is better than it appears.
This is like, I know it's not 2 weeks in a row, but it's twice in 3 weeks that you've thrown me off with how you started.
I hit start and that thing came up that says, I'm like, is that like the
It's
items
like the mirror
in the window are closer than they appear?
Okay, that's kind of scary that we both went to the side mirror in the car.
Do you know what the sad thing is, Jess?
What?
It won't be that long where that will date you.
I'm aware.
I got dated many times this week. I referenced Joe Friday and people were like,
you did reference Joe Friday. Yeah.
Tom Hanks played Joe Friday.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Dun 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 dun.
Meanwhile, people are Googling Joe Friday.
They should. Just the facts, man. That's not
wrong
Joe Friday.
Show.
What?
I said wrong show.
No, I know that, but I just did Dragnet. Dun dun dun. Okay. So I felt like.
So now we're going to Law and Order.
I feel like I got to give credit to Law and Order. I don't know why. Here's what I'm thinking, Jess.
Clear eyes, full hearts.
Can't lose.
It's a little late. We got to work on your time.
Almost. We do. As a Texan, I'm disappointed in myself.
Yeah, I made a Texan reference and I got rolling eyes a few minutes ago.
You did. You know, I don't know that I've ever told you that the book that show is based off of is Salina,
Friday Night Lights, for anyone that's
Texas.
wondering.
And I grew up in the town right next to it. Or I went to high school. Didn't grow up. I went to high school in the town right next to it. McKinney. Fun fact.
Did you live in a yellow submarine?
I did not. Did not live in a yellow submarine.
You're wondering how does that connect, don't you?
I very much am trying to figure it out in my head.
That I was born.
Where I was born.
Lived a man who sailed the seas.
And everyone, this is what I'm dealing with on a daily basis, just so you all can fully sympathize.
Sympathize. We're hiring. This probably excites them. Where else do you get an opportunity that in multiple conversations a day, what someone says,
music lyrics are referenced.
What?
And then you have to decode what is the song lyric and how is it connected to what I just said. Keeping us on our toes 24/7.
It's like living an episode of Whose Line Is It Anyway?
It really is. That's an accurate descriptor of working here. It's like living in an episode of Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's accurate.
So what are we talking about today, Jess? I think we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, actually.
I think you picked this topic just to trigger me because I used to have to work on these frequently in my past life. In my pre-Lyft, pre-Imagine life time.
Can you even remember that?
It both feels like yesterday and 100 years ago.
Well, I guess you can because it's like from dark to light. You're going to remember that.
It is. We are going to talk about RFPs today and why RFPs for CRMs fail. Always fail.
Yes, they always fail.
Always fail.
As a matter of fact, the best that they fail is when they make it too complicated and you end up not making a decision.
Oh, wow. It's a bold statement.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think that, so RFPs in general suck.
I remember us having this conversation because I worked with you and we talked about that.
You know, so you've always heard me talk about RFPs from the sales perspective. Like if you go back to those days, I was, RFPs suck but RFPs suck. And today I'm talking about it from the customer perspective. And as I've thought about it, while there are a lot of things that are not design for RFPs. CRM is probably the worst. There's probably nothing worse to put through an RFP or RFP-like process than CRM.
Why is that?
Because it always fails. See, I like to keep things simple.
That's great. Wait, perfect.
See, I give a full explanation and you tell me that's a lot of words.
I do.
I make it very simple, straightforward, and it's like, here's why. I think it's for two reasons. It looks natural. It makes sense, and it's so bad. Because you think you're buying a product,
right?
But you're not buying a product. Here's an interesting thing. I've never seen an RFP for a position someone's hiring for. Why don't they do that? Why aren't there RFPs for jobs?
Because no one would go through all the work of completing one.
Okay, hold on a second, Jess. You've sat through a SIDS interview before.
I have sat through a SIDS interview. That was my hesitation.
No, I mean, why don't you put on we're hiring a CMO. It's going to be we're paying them $350,000, $400,000 base salary. They've got a 50% bonus pool plus long-term benefit and stock. I don't know. That's worth filling out an RFP. I bet you. Why don't they put out RFPs for that? You wanna know why? Because it's stupid. You wouldn't do it because you can't RFP a CMO.
Well, I mean, you could, but it wouldn't be a good idea.
Well, how do you RFP a CMO to you're hiring a CMO because you need something new to happen tomorrow. You need something different to happen tomorrow.
Right.
So So how do you RFP that? How do you spreadsheet that?
You can't. Yeah.
Right? So let's talk about RFPs in general. Then let's talk about how it ends up being applied to CRM. And I want to be clear here. Like what I am talking about. I mean, if you are doing an RFP, by the way, this is how I know. I mean, here's a proof point that RFPs are radically not designed for what they're used for. And that is, I ask anyone listening that's involved or thinking about an RFP, when is the last time you've RFP'd for something like a CRM or tech or whatever, that your RFP schedule has been met?
Yeah.
Right. And here's what people say. They go, well, I'm sorry. So let's talk about what is an RFP designed for? Here's the first thing to understand. An RFP, the purpose of an RFP is not to enable you to make the best decision. That is not why RFPs exist.
Okay. So why do they exist?
To make sure you don't make a bad decision, to reduce the likelihood of a bad decision. Where did RFPs come from? RFPs are, and they originated for, and they're used today, and they should be used today when you're buying commoditized products. There is a clear specification.
Yep.
The specification is all that matters. So I am buying salt.
Yeah.
I am buying, we need a chemical compound that meets these criteria. It is only the thing that matters. By the way, you know what? If you're buying a telephony system, I could see where an RFP may make sense.
Right.
If you are, if there is no change component to that, right? So it is for comparing things that are the same.
Yep.
To defining to a specific objective numerical outcome that is based on past.
That is based on past.
That's based on past experience, based on past performance.
Okay.
Right. So like, USDA, I'm buying chicken.
Mm-hmm.
There are RFPs like that. That's what it's designed for. Now, the thing is, the moment you get to any kind of variance, RFPs are no longer effective.
Yeah.
And all they are able to do is enable you to avoid making the worst decision.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that manifest itself when we're talking about CRM type purchases or analyses?
Yep.
And so this is where I want to be clear. Whether or not you are doing officially an RFP. And I was just on a call earlier this week where they're not doing an RFP.
Mm-hmm.
They did they looked at demos. So they did a first round of demos. And then from that, they've now put together, I think it's 317 lines of technical requirements.
Okay.
So the way the RFP approach manifests itself is the lead tool in how you're thinking about things, how you're analyzing, how you're asking people to present, et cetera, is a list of technical requirements.
Yep.
Now, what's wrong with technical requirements?
They don't take into account heuristics or the people.
They don't take into account heuristics, the people. How do you RFP UI?
I wouldn't even know how to start.
Yeah. By the way, here's the thing about UI. Some people like it.
Yeah.
Some people don't.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a universal UI that everybody loves.
There's not?
By the way, here's the other thing that's really interesting on this too. Most people hate the text prompt that dominates the human computer interface. They hate it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The Google search box.
Yeah.
Right. And it's amazing how that's still dominant. So let's look at history. Alexa comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone falls in love with it. I can query my box. I can ask a question.
I understand that. I've never heard it described in that way before.
Right, but I can ask a question.
Yeah.
I don't have to type it into and it answers back.
Yep.
Except it doesn't work.
I know. Actually, my 7-year-old yells at her Alexa consistently.
But by the way, I don't just mean that it doesn't work. I mean, it's not adopted.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not adopted. And I actually read an article about this a couple months ago. What is the recent, and some people make the legitimate argument, the most successful tech product introduction, certainly in the last decade. And some people make the argument by the numbers, it's the most successful in the history of technology.
You talking
ChatGPT.
Decade? Oh, ChatGPT. Okay, that's not where I was going to go, but okay. Decade threw me off.
100 million users. I think it was in 11 days.
Okay.
Have you used ChatGPT at all?
I've played with it. I don't know that I would say used it, but yeah.
Were you blown away by the UI?
No.
By the way, what's the interface? How do you interface with ChatGPT? A query box.
Yeah,
it's a
I
text
was going
query.
to say just like everything else. Yeah.
A text query.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I show you show somebody an email, it has no images. They go, oh no, that email. Show somebody an email with no images. So show someone an email with images. They're going to, oh my God, the email with images is much better. Except the data shows that from a activation standpoint, every additional images reduces activation by a statistically significant amount. Right. So you have these things that you're in essence RFPing things that are not objective. They are inherently subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So here's the problem with technical requirements. The first problem is it violates the prime directive.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, because the technology is now leading.
And I don't care what anyone says. I mean, and by the way, no. It's we're looking for the business. Well, the business result isn't actually defined here. The business outcome.
Right.
Oh no. Oh well, no. We need 500 people to adopt it. Okay. Well, there's no adoption requirements here.
Right.
By the way, how would you do adoption requirements?
You couldn't.
You can't.
Yeah.
Right. You're making a judgment because, by the way, if you have an adoption problem, so you want an adoption, so you want more adoption, and I don't know anyone that has ever said adoption is really important here that is not currently having an adoption problem.
Right.
Right. So what you're asking for is a change.
Right.
Well, that's not a column of yes, no's, or numbers.
Yep.
Right? You could theoretically ask for adoption metrics, but that's a bullshit ask because you have no way to verify anything. And what does adoption mean? My favorite measurement of adoption is the client that we worked with a while back, whose measurement was logs into the system at least one time per month. Now, I'm sorry, where I come from, that's not adoption. And I would say further outside of that, adoption isn't really what the objective should be. It should be utilization.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk more on that later. But do you know who spends a tremendous amount of money on technology?
Who?
The government.
Okay.
The U.S. government.
Yep.
Spends a tremendous amount of money on technology.
Yep.
And by the way, in fairness to the people that work in government, you got a lot of smart people that work in government, especially in the technology area.
Yep.
And you got a lot of smart people who put together the technical requirements and the RFPs. And here's the thing. When's the last time the government rolled out a piece of technology that was worth anything? Why? Why does government technology suck?
Because they use RFPs.
Well, okay, but more than that, here's why. Because in most cases, by the way, there was there have been some, like the VA rolled out something where it was successful, but it took the project manager to go through a process so that the regulations would be waived so that they could manage the process effectively, because you've got a group of people that define the requirements, who turn it over to a group of people who review, right?
Yep.
You've separated the people who need to use it and get the results from the people who are deciding.
Yep.
CRM, RFPs, anybody? And the business requirements, like, you're actually not even allowed in most cases to comment on the business requirements. Like, you can't even say,
right,
well, you might not want to do this.
Yep.
So what ends up happening is they end up speccing out a lot of stone boats, and they put it out to bid. I can build a great stone boat. It's going to sink.
Yep.
Right. So what we're doing is we're separating the business specs from the technology specs. And further, and this is why buying technology is hard. Because what you're looking for when you're buying technology, any central piece of technology, any technology that's part of a change management element. And as a reminder, if you change CRM, you are changing behavior.
Yep. Is
all of the things that really matter are at best intangible and are most likely invisible. They're not, and they're highly, highly subjective.
Yep.
So it takes a very disciplined process to judge on what's important. It's so easy to fall into technical requirement. And by the way, part of the problem is that you're defining requirements in a situation that you have zero experience with.
Yeah.
Because here's my question to you, Jess. You're pretty good with databases, right?
Yep.
You're even a queen of databases. You're a guru, a ninja, a rock star. Do I need to add money?
Doug's just trying to make me uncomfortable. Doug's just trying to make me.
No, I was just trying to I was just trying to run up my tab for the swear jar. I was trying to find a lot of our digital swear words. What is your experience with next week?
With NetSuite?
No, with next week.
Next week. What do you mean?
What experience do you have with next week?
Zero.
Yeah. So how do you RFP that? That's why
no
idea. Hard, right? And so with the greatest intent.
Yep.
If the first meaningful thing that goes on paper are tech requirements, you are now anchored on tech requirements. You might think you're looking at business process requirements, but you're not, because you can't see the business process requirements through the tech, right? So first off, you've broken out the business process from the tech requirements. The next problem is you're now breaking each tech requirement into an individual thing, right?
Yep.
Look, technology with behavior is the epitome of the whole needs to be far, far greater and different than the sum of its parts.
Yep.
Right. The problem with implementing technology, and especially when you go to CRM, is you can't just check boxes. And by the way, it's not just checking boxes, because you can't just check boxes with high quality work. I can
No.
check every box off with high quality work and have abject failure and shelfware.
Yep.
Right? It's a piece of shit product. The end result is a piece of shit, but it wasn't done by piece of shit people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's little bits and pieces that drift us further and further off. And so what's happening is utilizing CRM to drive business results, to enable and accelerate motion is a complex system, which means everything affects everything. And by the way, you don't necessarily want optimum everything. And here's how I'll explain that. Show me the last team that was put together in any sport that was truly a team sport that had the best players in every position that won anything on a consistent basis. The closest would be the Miami Heat when they had Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, and LeBron James in his.
I was going to say Bulls, but yeah, sure.
Well, the Bulls only had two. The Bulls only had two of the best. And by the way,
yeah,
what did the Bulls do when Michael Jordan wasn't there?
Not a lot.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
What did Scottie Pippen do when Scottie Pippen was the guy?
He wasn't as good.
Right.
He wasn't as good.
And so what you look at, and here's the interesting thing, right? Phil Jackson played the triangle offense, which was a very team-based, movement-based, right?
Yep.
What did Dennis Rodman do? Now Scottie Pippen legitimately was great, right?
Yeah,
legitimately
he was.
great.
Yep.
Dennis Rodman, what did he do anywhere other than the Bulls?
Oh, he's ball hog.
He played one role extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
What did John Paxson do anywhere? He was a mediocre player, right? All those things are going on because we're crafting a holistic, complex, changing organism, right? So you've broken everything in its parts. You can't see the whole anymore. And I don't mean the whole. I mean, you can't see
the whole piece,
right?
All the pieces together. Yep.
Right. I'm not using this, right? And all those things go on. So those tech spec, and by the way, when you look at these documents, we list them out. We say, is this a critical piece? Is this nice to have? Is this optional?
Yeah.
Okay. Now here's what I know. If we only gave you that you need to have, that wouldn't be sufficient. So which are the ones that would be nice to have, do you need versus do you not need? And oh, by the way, at what level do you need them?
Right.
Right. I'll give you a great example: permissioning and back-end configuration.
Yep.
The ability to do individual permissioning on any, at a field level, user level, team level, et cetera, et cetera. Take HubSpot, the answer is yes. Take Salesforce, the answer is yes.
Yep.
The two of them are not equivalent there.
No.
Right? So what do you need the permissioning for? What is that supporting? Okay. From an implementation standpoint, I love it because we're like, here's the requirements document. Can you put a scope together? Well, I don't know. Am I scoping for the minimum here? Am I scoping for...
Yeah.
Right? You can't
Well, we've run into this before where we talk about all the functionality and capabilities, and it's like, okay, well, we got to meet the team where they're at though, and they're not quite ready to use some of these more power user features. And that's not accounted for in the RFP because you need that maybe down the line, but you don't need that today.
That's a psychological concession that we make.
What do you mean?
There's a fear factor.
Mm-hmm.
If you build, so I kind of get lost in the advanced functionality debate because if you build it right,
mm-hmm.
they don't necessarily know that they're using advanced functionality.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Now, there are times where maybe the business process isn't defined enough for you to build it right.
Right.
Right. Certainly that. Right. And again, all of those things come about. And the problem again is, and I want to be really clear, if you've started off and you've defined this and you've defined it, if the first thing that you put again on paper, really on paper is these requirements, or you have a document with 273 technical requirements and you have 5 bullets for business process or outcomes, you are defined technically, right? Then you are viewing everything through that technical lens, and you are reducing the likelihood of making the right choice of the tool, and you are lengthening and complicating the path to utilization and value. Because again, even if the requirement ends up being right, the rationale for the requirement isn't there. There is no plot.
Yep.
Right. Like, by the way, ever seen a movie that's just like filled with stars and everyone goes, this movie is gonna be a blockbuster.
Yeah.
And you go see it, it's got all the right actors and actresses, and it just blows.
Yep.
Oh my god, I'm going blank. What was the Warren Beatty, Dustin Hoffman, Ishtar?
Oh my god. Oh yeah, Ishtar. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go, aging
you have all the
yourself again.
pieces there. You got the screenwriter, the director.
Yep.
It's got George Clooney. It's got Bob. It's like, hey, and you're like, what in the world? That's what we're talking about, right? Yep. So here's the better approach.
Okay.
And by the way, you can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. You can't do this alone because you can't do it with only the insider's view. You can't do this alone because you don't have enough. You can't do this alone because you can't do it from within your own system.
Yeah.
And there are too many. There's too much politics. There's too much legacy perspective. There's too much. I'm not saying you don't have the capability to do this. I'm saying it just doesn't work when you do it on your own. You need an outsider with expertise because, by the way, the first thing you got to do is you got to break shit apart.
Yep.
Right. We talked about this on data architecture and structure, right? You gotta break apart what's going on, right? You really have to go, what is the business motion? What's happening? Where's this? And the way that you go through that, the first deliverable you have should be, what are the critical user stories? What are the critical business stories?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Probably you want to have 5 to 7, probably somewhere around there.
Yep.
You know what? Maybe you want to have 15. I don't know. That's like, I haven't thought about this to the standpoint of, can you get to the point? I mean, you probably can get to the point where it's too many business stories. What happens when I see that you get to, when you're at too many user stories on something like this, if you're doing user stories correctly, is you see like 4 user stories are 90% the same.
Right.
But if I'm working in if I'm an organization that has, 7 divisions, 832 sales reps, 475 service people, and I might want a different user story for each constituency that's 90% the same. By the way, to be able to respond to it and translate this to other things, if you're dealing with somebody who knows what they're doing, that's not going to create a whole lot of problem, right? But again, you should, like, if you only have 2 user stories, you probably haven't defined it enough. When you start getting to more than 7, that's when you can definitely begin to think, hey, are we overdoing this? Are we making this harder? Those user stories should put forth, and they should be stories, beginnings, middles, ends.
Yep.
A journey, there's a hero, there's a barrier, there's an action, there's an outcome. Because that's what you want. You're not looking at buying more technology because you want. I mean, maybe you're looking at Vision Pro. Maybe you're buying Vision Pro because no one else has it, and so you want it because, hey, it's a new piece of technology, and look at what it says. I don't think that CRM has quite that cachet. What are those motions? Be clear on those motions. Debate those motions. Make sure either those stories define outcomes, not necessarily results. Results are fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to get to where we're $650 million in revenue. We need to get to $1 billion in revenue within the next 3 years. Okay, that's the result. What are the stories? Right. What are the outcomes that need to happen so that you can get those results?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what you're defining. So you're like, what are the outcomes from there? Then from there, what are the tech specs? That's when your tech requirements come in. Right? Now I start looking at the tech. What do we need to be able to do to achieve this? Unless you're the CRM expert, CRM experts, right? You can't do it from, I'm the CRM expert in my company. Again, you don't have enough cross experience. You can't get things to the place where we're now looking at I'm sorry, you can't go from tech spec to outside that. And so what you're looking at here, I think what I just said made absolutely no sense, Jess, and I'm not exactly sure what I was trying to say, but that's why people love me.
Yep.
There was a nugget in there somewhere. What you're doing with your tech specs here is you're looking at what do we need to be able to do this?
Okay. Yep.
What do we need to ensure that this doesn't blow up? So like security elements, those are legitimate requirements.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, they're legitimate requirements that don't necessarily have a direct relationship to the business motion or outcome. As a matter of fact, one of the things to be careful about when you're looking at things like that, not only do security requirements not typically contribute to the business motion you're trying to support, the thing you've got to be careful about is that they actually interfere with what you're trying to do. Like, there's an application that we use that from time to time seems to get all screwy with its two-factor authentication, and suddenly you go through a pattern where 4 times in one day, it's acting like you haven't been there in 7 weeks, logs you out of everything, and you have to log back in, going through that whole process. And I got to tell you, if that happened any more regularly, it might negatively impact adoption.
Yeah.
It might negatively impact utilization. So one thing to do when you're looking at those requirements that are more operational, purely operational, institutional, is be sure to focus on what's the intent. Why is this important? Why do we need this? Because one of the other problems when you look at tech requirements and you look at things through the lens of tech requirements is you end up looking for something that matches the way the requirement is written, not what the intent of the requirement is. And so you remember, everything you're doing has a trade-off. So you might be making a trade-off that's unnecessary, or there might be other ways that things are managed or approached. And as an example, we do, everyone who listens to this knows we do a lot of work with HubSpot.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a tech requirement that we got that was HIPAA compliant.
Yeah.
We were able to ask them, well, what needs to be HIPAA compliant? And what needed to be HIPAA compliant, 95% of it had nothing to do with HubSpot.
Right.
And the only thing that HubSpot had to do with it was that the perception of the people who put it together was information was going to be coming in through HubSpot to go into whatever system that HIPAA related information needed to go into.
Yeah.
Well, we were able to solve that by using a form structure. We used a third-party company, FormStack in this case, give them credit, where we were able to combine a form into a single form experience that had a HIPAA component to it and a non-HIPAA component to it.
Right.
The HIPAA stuff went right into HubSpot. The non-HIPAA stuff went right into their EMR.
You mean that reverse, by the way?
I mean that reverse. The HIPAA stuff EMR, and the non-HIPAA stuff. I am dyslexic.
Right.
But again, on the surface of that, we didn't know. In another case, there was a situation where people did need to access that. They would be using the CRM.
Yep.
But it was only for specific use case, and it was mainly for accessing it. So in that case, we built an application that enabled someone to, in essence, pull in a view of that into HubSpot, even though the data was never in HubSpot. And that application only worked with people who had the authorization, because they were looking at it in HubSpot, but nothing actually existed in HubSpot. So again, right, that's the right intent. You can't get any more complicated than that you're HIPAA compliant or you're not HIPAA compliant.
Right.
So you start with your business motions, understand that. Deliverable is user stories, defining your outcomes, your tech specs. And here's where your tech specs play.
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no. Meets or doesn't meet. So you're looking at all the options.
Yeah.
And from a tech requirement perspective, the only time tech requirements should be held against a CRM is the CRM fails because of this requirement. This project will fail because of this requirement.
And this is where it's important to be able to talk through the why of the tech specs in the cases that you.
Well, here's the good news. If you've done the user stories and if you've gone through your motions, done your user stories, defined your outcomes, the why is there.
Right. Okay.
That is what is determining your tech spec. So by the way, you no longer have nice to haves.
Right.
So like I see something like there's a tech requirement, must have ability to send blast emails to a large quantity of users segmented by filterable criteria.
Right. And
I say it's 2023.
Yes.
Now, like that's not a tech requirement. That's not a tech requirement. Except there's some CRM system out there that calls itself something that really is just an overlay on Outlook.
Right.
It doesn't enable you to do that. So someone could legitimately say that's a tech requirement. I'm like, no, it's not a tech requirement. It's actually a business use requirement that sounds like a tech requirement, because how are you going to use that? What is it going to be used for? Because there's 100 other things that come into who's going to be using it. What level of expertise do they have? Do they have design expertise in-house? Are they using an agency for this? Is this something that they need to be able to do? The person who's responsible for this is responsible for 17 other things. And so they can't spend time, and it needs, like, there's all these business elements that come into it that would get articulated in a user story and remember, you're letting anyone who you're going to look at, you're doing a discovery and an alignment process to ensure we all understand each other. You're looking to them. How are they helping you define your business stories better, your user stories better? Right. So those things get defined in the user story. Now I don't need to have the tech spec, because what I'm going to ask you to do from a demo standpoint is show me how you deliver on these user stories. Right. And now the people that are watching it, now the people who are using it, I don't want my marketing manager to determine what CRM we're going to get. They don't know tech. Right. They don't need to know tech. The whole reason that you're buying a CRM or marketing automation platform is so that people who don't know tech can use tech. Your IT team needs to make sure that it meets your IT requirements.
Yep.
Right. And so now you go from 317 requirements to probably 17, I don't know, maybe 50, outside case 100. But nothing, ability to integrate with X. Okay, here's a simple question. What level of API access? That's the question, right? I mean, I've literally seen 76 lines about integrating with different applications. And it's like, well, the question there is not about the CRM. It could be a question about that application, right? If that application doesn't have access, doesn't matter what. Like, I can't answer for them. And again, it becomes just this whole waste. It's the wrong direction. And shit, how many times do we get into an implementation where we have an integration that's scoped in, and we get to the roadmap and they realize, oh, we don't need that. Right. So that's what happens. So you have your tech spec, and that is a qualifier, disqualifier. It's either meet or don't meet, pass, fail. Right. There's no, it's better.
Yep.
Tech requirement is better, because if it's better at that tech requirement that doesn't relate to business requirement, then who cares? Why are you paying for it? Then from there, you create a scoring rubric based on those business outcomes, based on those stories. You now say, what are the things that would enable us to make a better decision? What are the things that would put us in the better position? So we're looking at the minimum requirements that reduce failure, right? Which is why we're doing an RFP in the first place. Why we're doing tech requirements in the first place is make sure we don't screw this thing up. And now we're scoring on the things that actually matter. So the tech requirement score is pass fail. And by the way, if you do this right, you can save a whole lot of time in your upfront, because there would be no problem. It would be totally reasonable. We've defined our user stories, our business outcomes, our business processes. These are our tech requirements. These are all must-haves.
Yep.
Right? Here's our user stories. Here's the tech requirement document. You're providing your answers to us. And again, in the nice to haves, those nice to haves should be nice to have business motion. Like if you want to have, these are the must have stories and these are the nice to have stories, go for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Weight your must have stories with higher scores, right? You can, or add a multiple to your must haves. But again, the must haves are the motions, not the tech requirements, right? So we're now preventing failure, finding what success is. We're actually modeling the implementation in advance of the implementation, which is going to greatly shorten your time to value.
Yep.
What's the frustrating part that everybody has in CRM world? You sign the license, you start paying for the system, and then it builds out. Well, you know what? If you would just do some work ahead of time, you could shorten that period. By the way, I didn't, what was I saying? Oh, okay. To finish the thought that I said earlier. So if you were to send me, here's our user stories, here's our tech requirements, answer these, we are gonna, once we pass, it's like we're sending this to 9 companies. The ones that pass, we're gonna have discoveries with. We're gonna dig deep into that.
Yep.
And it is, again, literally pass fail. And you don't do the user stories after that. The user stories have to be what drive your tech requirement.
Yep.
Do your scoring rubric, then review on the rubric.
So you're essentially flipping the process, and then you're still also canceling. You're doing the same thing you were doing with the RFP before. You're still canceling out the ones that would have potential to fail. So you're accomplishing the same thing with the RFP that you were really accomplishing before, but now you're adding on the ability to have those heuristics and accomplish it the right way, really.
So, you know what? I just realized talking about this and you saying that I'd add one more area.
Okay.
What are the contributors to failure?
Oh, yeah.
What are the business, adoption and utilization, sophistication of team could be like those are things that, and again, they need to be that's part of. Now I'll tell you, a really good user story would actually incorporate that. Our widget parts distribution team, made up of people who have been in old industries that still carry order pads around with them for 27 years, need to transform to X, Y, or Z. So you've kind of built in that failure element into your user story, right? Invest in the user story. By the way, this buy-in idea, it's the users that have to give you the information for your user stories.
Yep.
But what has agile software development taught us? Don't let tech people define the product. Get out and talk to the users.
Yeah.
Build the stories. By the way, don't ask them what they want. Ask them to tell their story. Now the stories go to the tech people. When the tech people know the story, that's where they can be creative tech people. So the only thing that I would say where I disagree is you said I'm basically flipping the process. And I don't think that that's actually a fair characterization. And the reason is they don't do the second process.
Okay, well.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that they're doing the tech requirements and then they're going through some element of business process, et cetera. It's right. that they do the tech requirements and then they go into everything and they keep, you've seen it, Jess. We go into a conversation with somebody. It's like, what we want to understand is what's a day in life, week in life feel. We want motion. So I want you to forget all about the technology today. Right. I want you to tell me if it just worked the way you wanted it to work, what would it look like? Well, in my previous system, I had a lead status field, and I think it's really important to have a lead, right? And I don't blame them. Everything, by the way, I used to say to them, okay, thanks, I appreciate that. Remember, we want to talk about the business process.
Yeah.
And I stopped doing that because I realized they got mad, and I didn't just do it because they got mad. They got mad for the wrong reason. Meaning they thought they were talking about the business process. They've been so focused on the tech specs that they thought they were talking about the business process. And that's where, that's where it's become really clear to me. You can't, the moment you start with the tech specs, you're always going to work suboptimally. So by the way, what do you do if you've started your tech spec? Those people that are listening that have started their tech specs, or those people that are listening that have their RFP out and they're going, Well, what do I do? What do I do?
Start with your business motions, create your user stories.
Yeah,
start
but they already
start
have.
identifying those items. Okay.
They already have their tech
I don't
specs.
know.
What do? They throw
I
them
don't
away.
know.
Throw them away. Throw them away. I'm serious. Throw them away.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have time. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you
Yeah.
do. Because A, what I'm talking about doesn't have to take a lot of time.
Right.
B, the place where time might be a real issue is, well, the license for our existing system is expiring, and so we lose that on this day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's part of your user story. What you're going to find though is, so like we need to be able to meet that. And oh, if that's the case, and remember this, the reason that time is crucial is because we lose access to this product in 97 days.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't lose access to that system in 97 days, the time period that you should be caring about is the time it takes to it actually being used correctly, to being on the right path.
Yep.
So if the 97th day matters because you have a cliff, then what matters on the 97th day is that there is no cliff.
Yeah.
Which means what you're looking to do is to meet the critical functionality of whatever the existing tool is. You don't need to do anything more than that. I'm not saying you shouldn't try to do anything more than that on the 97th day, but because if you stick on the path, because it's too late now, what I promise you is it will take far, far longer to get to. I mean, it will end up taking longer, I'm certain, to get to the point of implementation where you're actually launching, let alone launching it right, than if you were to throw it out, step back, and take that approach. So again, start with your motions, create your user stories, define the outcomes, then establish your tech specs. That tech spec document meets or doesn't meet. It is not used to determine the winner. It is only used to determine those that are not worth moving forward with because they won't work. Create a scoring rubric based on those user stories and use cases, review and decide based on the rubric.
Yep.
Do that, you get everything that you're doing the RFP for or the tech requirements for, and you're aligning yourself to move in the right direction.
Yep. Cool.
I don't know about you, Jess. I think I solved the RFP problem.
I think you did too. Throw it out is what I heard.
But you know why people don't throw it out?
Because it's their what they're used to. It's their comfort zone. It makes me feel why.
Nope. Because we're humans, and avoiding failure is far, far more important than getting success.
Yeah.
And the key is, and by the way, you know what? We have a client who occasionally drives us crazy. Who every time, if he even thinks we're talking about an improvement, he's like, I'm all for improvements. I'm all for better, but you know, we need to make sure this thing works first. And it's like, no, that's what we're doing, right? But he's not wrong, right?
Right.
And by the way, in the buying journey, first half of the buying journey, the motivation is about improvement and succeeding. Second half of the buying journey is all about avoiding failure. And lastly, are you going to be successful because of your CRM?
No.
Right. Technology will never be the reason you succeed.
Yep.
It's often a reason that you fail.
Yeah.
So why do they not throw out the RFP? Because the RFP is a failure prevention device.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So we keep trying to throw out the RFP with conviction and narrative, but we never address that underlying piece. I was kidding when I said I saw the RFP process, but I do really think, I mean, if you look at the companies that buy tech the best, this is how they do it, right? This brings you both.
Yep. I have a couple of takeaways. So that process that you outlined, by focusing on business motions, laying out the outcomes and user stories first, that's going to shorten your time to utilization and adoption. Reiterating, focusing on the outcomes, not the results. We've talked about that in so many episodes. And then remembering that what you're looking for when you're buying tech, most of the things are either intangible or invisible. That's so true. And so putting an RFP to it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I can't hear you. I missed what you said.
It's because I was muted.
There you go.
The kettle was barking. Yeah. It's a lot easier to measure the what than the why. But the why is the difference between success and.
Yep.
Actually, that reminds me, this will be my final statement. My final statement. The tech requirements are there to prevent failure. But just because you've met the tech requirements doesn't mean that you've bypassed the primary cause of failure.
Yep.
And it's the why elements, it's the motion elements that are ultimately going to determine success or failure. The tech requirements put you in a fail mode before you have a chance to be successful.
Yep. I agree. And on that note,
I bid you adieu.
Thanks, everybody.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. Doug's final statement deserves a recall. The why is going to determine your success. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to go subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us. Leave us a review and share the episode. If you have any questions you would like to ask Doug or Jess about RFPs, email me at hannah@liftenablement.com or hit us up on Twitter @DemandCreator. Until next time, remember, you can't solve your upstream problems downstream.